and welcome back to Half an Hour Hack. I'm your host, Matthew Danielsson, and alongside me are my co-hosts,
Brian Richardson,
Joe Panzarino,
and we're really glad you can join us today. And boy, do we have a show for you. So, hacking. We all know so many examples of it from movies and even our previous episodes. But for today, I want to shine some light on a topic that works hand in hand with hacking, and that's whistleblowing. Not the instrument, but the act of exposing information or activity within a private, public, or government organization that is deemed illegal, unsafe, or a waste, a fraud, or an abuse of taxpayer funds, or even power. When people think of whistleblowers, I feel like two big names come to mind for both the old age and the new age. One of them is Edward Snowden, and the other one is Roger Bisjali. Today we'll be discussing those two in details in terms of who they are, what they did, and some of the repercussion of their actions, and how they are viewed then and now. Thanks again for joining me, and let's begin. So first we're going to talk about Edward Snowden. So Edward Snowden became a household name after he copied and leaked extremely classified information from the National Security Agency, or as we know it, the NSA, in 2013. So not even 10 years ago, 7 years ago now. He was a CIA employee and a subcontractor who leaked global surveillance programs that raised eyebrows and questions about the institutions around us and the value of our individual privacy in our government's eyes. Without a large lecture, Snowden worked in the CIA and the NSA, and within a few months, gradually he became very uncomfortable and disillusioned to the point where he was able to copy the sensitive information from these large corporations. And you're probably thinking, well, what was the information? Well, what he captured was a lot of the National Security Agency blueprints of their security systems and operations. This information would be used to prove that these corporations are using spyware to eavesdrop, scan, and drop in on any individual without privacy consent, or most likely without their even know-abouts. It was said that it was, I want to say, it's a rough estimate of how much he did actually copy, but it's around 1 million documents. And the funny thing is that they have no clue which documents he actually copied, to show his, technical experience of just how well he did it. What's really fascinating about this information is it would reveal how to dodge a lot of the spyware and practically evade any effort the NSA and the CIA would perform. And I think that's why it was such a hiatus, because not only was he whistleblowing saying, hey, they're spying on you in very latent terms, but to say they're spying on you and here's how to avoid that. And I personally think that's why he was such a massive target for capture. He revealed that loophole in a global surveillance system that anyone can perform. And they usually don't like that type of stuff. They, like to control it. But what I wanted to open for discussion today and allow the viewers to think about a few things. So first question I want to ask you guys is, would you do the same thing if you were in Edward Snowden's position of being that employee, very uncomfortable and feels the need to expose this information?
I think from a national security issue, I think it's hard to say I would because of my time in the military. I was kind of trained into you're doing things for a reason, but at the same time, I've also been at workplaces where I don't agree with what's going on, and then you do have to speak up. So I kind of have to toe that fine line of why I understand his thought process, because I don't know the information he found out, all of it, obviously. So for me, it's a fine line to toe. Like, having all the information he did see might make me think, no, I'd have to leak this. This is too big.
Yeah.
But from just knowing that they were spying, like, on everyone obviously is problematic. Not everyone does need to be spied on. But at the same time, it depends on the information they were getting and how that information was being used. And obviously Snowden probably found that information, and that's why he decided to leak it. But obviously I don't know it from a personal standpoint.
I personally don't think I would ever put myself in a position to get remotely close to the amount of information that that Snowden was discovering. I'd be terrified to look into all of this. So I don't know if I could say I would do the same thing out of fear of the repercussions, and also just what you don't know can't hurt you. And so I'd rather not know all this stuff.
That's fair. I think it's funny that he didn't even reveal all of it. they said 1 million documents, but they never say how absolutely massive this database was. So the
Yeah.
fact that he gave one piece to the puzzle and it caused such a situation is very telling of just how massive this program is. And I think that would segue into our next question of how do you feel about this National Security Agency, the CIA, the surveillance program?
So I think it's problematic for the reason I brought up before is we don't know what they're using with this information. If we knew that they were using it exclusively for security purposes, there was nothing else going out, they were only looking at certain key phrases and stuff, then it wouldn't be as problematic. But the fact that it seems like they're watching every single thing, that's where it gets problematic for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I I have nothing to hide, so like they could spy on me all they want, and they'll just have a really boring 24 hours of surveillance. But with that said, I mean, I don't know. It's like it's my private, personal life. I think there's a fine line that they're crossing there. It's like personal space.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I think they can collect a lot of information that we don't even think about, such as like location and your bank services and your spending costs and what are you viewing in the advertisement. There's so much data about us now, and that's in 7 years later than this story.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine just from then until now, the amount of data that every individual has, the amount of dirt, even if there's nothing, we'll call it dirt because that's how I'm going to put it at least, that you just collect and everything leads to something else. So how do you think he was viewed back then versus now, 7 years down the line?
So for me, obviously, I come from a very interesting position. I was still in the Army when this story broke and everything. So I was very much on the side of the government. I was, okay, this dude went out and he got information he shouldn't have and leaked it from his job. Something like that for the military, if I were to leak information like that, that would get me sent to Leavenworth possibly for life, which is the military prison. So for me, it's kind of that you're drawing that fine line. Yet again, I will bring that up, is there's a fine line between what he did was good and what he did was kind of bad. Because he broke that code with his employer, but at the same time, his employer was kind of breaking the code by what they were doing. And that was more of a general public code than a code with him. He just then broke the code between him and his employer. So, but now I'm kind of more on the side of, okay, he leaked this information. We have more information on it, but we also see what that information has turned into with the whole like Amazon Echo and stuff, or Alexa, whatever it's called, where it seems like we're always having our information listened to and used against us. So, like, what really happened from that information is it went more public and now companies use it.
Yeah. I think he's like quietly a hero for a lot of people. I think like since the beginning of our nation, people have been saying like, oh, the government's spying on us. Like mm-hmm. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. And Edward Snowden went out and said, yeah, this is happening, and here's proof. And now there's just a lot of awareness to a situation that a lot of people were kind of blissfully unaware to.
Kind of piggybacking off that. I think at the time, people didn't want to. Their curiosity was like, oh, are they hacking on us? Like, are they looking at us? And then when he comes up and Edward's saying like, oh yeah, 100%, like here's proof about it. People were so staggered and astonished, like, oh, how could this happen? And I feel like if this happened now, I think it's so established that we really don't have privacy, and you got to practically go off the grid to stay off their systems. So I think if this were to happen now, people would be like, yeah, we already knew this, like it's no surprise. So I think back then because what was that? It was 2013.
2013.
Yeah, so that was when people were speculating, but they had no clue. And now that we have all this information, I think people would not brush it off to say, but I think they would be less surprised.
Yeah,
So,
it's like
I feel like it's kind of
2013.
obvious.
yeah,
People weren't
like
bringing microphones and cameras into their home yet. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
like they weren't bringing their Google Homes in. They didn't these things didn't
Mhm.
really happen yet. So like people didn't like think about, oh, they're looking at me through my webcam.
Mm-hmm.
So now
You
it's
wouldn't.
just as you bring this stuff in, you get more and more aware of the risk that someone's listening, someone's watching.
Yeah, I remember seeing an article. They were interviewing Mark Zuckerberg in his house, and he had a laptop behind him, and even he had a post-it note over the camera.
Oh
And
my
people were
goodness.
saying like, "Hey, listen, if Mark Zuckerberg's doing this, maybe we should be too."
Oh my
So,
gosh.
so I just want to segue into the next question. So, earlier I talked about he releases this information, and he's on a plane the next day. So he leaks it, and he's like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about that just very briefly. Of why do you think he left so fast? Why do you think this was so sudden, so fast, so critical of him to get out of the States as soon as he did this? Do you think he knew what was coming?
It's a
Oh,
bombshell.
100%. He
Yeah.
had to have known.
Mhm.
There's no way, because obviously other hackers have been caught in what was done to them. But this
Yeah.
was massive amounts of government information they did not want out that he was leaking. He knew that should the CIA need to remove him, they probably would have. So he probably knew that it wasn't just his career, but possibly his life was in danger if he did not get out.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly.
So in an interview he has in 2019, he states that he considers himself a whistleblower as opposed to a leaker. And then he reinforces that by saying a leaker only distributes information for personal gain. So his disclosures have been fueled over like mass debates over mass surveillance, government security, and the balance between national security and information privacy. Do you agree? Do you think that he's in the right by saying, "Oh, I'm not a leaker, I'm a whistleblower"? Is there a difference? Is it the same thing?
I actually like never thought of that, and I think that's a very interesting quote. And I have to agree with him because we're brought up knowing like this is the Constitution, this is our rights, like we're supposed to keep the government in check, the government's supposed to be there for us.
Mm-hmm.
So when something shady's going on and somebody knows about it, them telling the entire nation about it is basically doing what we're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like we're
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
something wrong. I'm not saying that it was the right move. I'm not saying what he did was good, but if you want to get technical, this could be considered whistleblowing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll agree. I do also think that it comes down to he didn't, because if he had just gone out with all the documents, but why is he keeping so much of the documentation? Is it just not important documentation, or is he keeping it for a reason? Because as we brought up in a previous episode, what do you do? It's hard to look at doing things for a positive reason when there's so much information. We brought that up in the previous episode about hackers that did it for reputation. And so it's hard to think he has all these files, but he's only leaked so much. What's in the rest of it, and why is he keeping it?
I have a theory about this. As long as he has information, he's relevant. And so it could be pointless documents that have no real weight to them whatsoever, but he has them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And while he holds that behind his back, people want to know what he's holding behind his back. But once he lets everything go that he ever found or does find, it's just like, yep, there it is. Like, there's nothing more to him now. Like now there's still a mystery to him, and he's still Snowden.
Yeah.
Like the guy they made a movie about,
Mm-hmm.
the guy that took national security and flipped it on its head.
Yeah. And segueing into the next question off relevancy, 7 years later, do you think this is still relevant? What are your thoughts on this topic now?
I'd say it's more relevant now than ever. I don't know about you guys.
I agree with that.
So I think what he leaked is more relevant because obviously it's become more mainstream with Google and Amazon constantly listening and everything and literally selling our information. But at the same time, like, what has he really done since then?
Yeah.
Like, he hasn't, all this other information he hasn't done anything recently to keep himself in the headlines. And it could be for his personal security, very well, because let's say he leaks something he's really not supposed to leak. The U.S. government at that point would not care where he is.
Yeah.
So maybe he's holding on to it for personal reasons. But I think what he leaked is more relevant, but he's less.
That's fair.
Okay. I like that. So now we're going to go on to our second whistleblower of today's episode, and that's about Roger Bizjolly. Although not as popular as Edward Snowden, doesn't have a crazy movie about him. Actually, I think he does. Well, there's a movie about what he was involved in, and he is played by an actor. Anyway, he's another whistleblower who found flaws in the Challenger space shuttle, which would later lead to a national tragedy on the explosion of the Challenger. Bizjolly was an American mechanical engineer, fluid dynamicist, and an aerodynamicist. But he's best known for his immense warnings and objections to the launch of the space shuttle in January of 1986. And I should say what context this was, I believe, the 10th launch of the space shuttle Challenger. But this one was special because they brought this American school teacher along. And it was a whole big thing. Okay, yeah. So what he said, what his objections were, is he correctly predicted, based on earlier flight data, that O-rings on the rocket boosters would fail if the shuttle launched in cold weather, which in January, which it was launching January 28th, a few days away from February, makes a lot of sense. And it would turn out that the launch date was one of the coldest days of that year. So these warnings did fall on deaf ears, and the launch was still done on January 28th, 1986. As we know now, within 73 seconds after launch, the space shuttle is disintegrated, killing all of its crew and including that American school teacher. And this was a whole big thing, a national tragedy, really. This was supposed to be a very monumental flight, and for it to there's not even a wreckage, there's not even remains, the entire thing is disintegrated in 73 seconds. So the aftermath of this is the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, ordered a presidential commission to review the review of this disaster. Bizjolly was one of the witnesses they called, and he gave accounts to how and why he felt the O-rings have failed, and he argued that the cause, that this cause was because of the company that he was working with and their managers, which resulted in a recommendation to launch, which was an unethical decision-making, he says, was an unethical decision-making forum resulting from intense customer intimidation. And after the commission gave its findings, Bizjolly found himself he was shunned by colleagues and managers, and he did resign. So I think it's very interesting that this very well immersed and very educated man who's a mechanical engineer, fluid dynamicist, aerodynamicist, and he's been working on this space shuttle for how many years? He's saying no, but they're saying, but the public is saying yes, and we got to do it. They can't cancel now, right? And we later find out why. And years later, after all this is said and done, for his honesty and integrity, both leading up to and directly following the shuttle disaster, he does receive the Award of Scientific Freedom and Responsibility by the American Association of the Advancement of Science in 1988. So I think it's a very interesting story. There's a lot of elements to it, and I want to open the floor up again. Why do you think his warnings weren't listened to?
Easy enough. It was money. They had the public looking at it. They needed this launch to go on when it did. It literally was, hey, So this launch needs to happen because we have all eyes on us. So I think it literally, money and publicity literally was why they did it.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's
Money
like
and publicity.
pressure
Yeah.
to perform, and just saying we're not going to do it. It's like it's not just like, oh, rain delay on a ball game. Like, this is sending people.
Yeah,
to
this is multi-million, if not billion-dollar project, and I also think even if like the public knew that he was saying, oh no, I still think he'd be overrun. People would say, oh, he's just one guy,
Yeah,
like we want to see this thing fly, and it's
we need to get people back into space. And
exactly, kickstart the program, and I think it was very important that they also had the American school teacher. That was a massive publicity stunt, but that was a massive pull to the public because it's these aren't your trained
it's the common
astronauts.
individual.
you're sending a regular person.
It's the regular person. If they can do it, we can all do it, right?
Exactly.
So,
And I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah.
I think because obviously to delay the launch any longer, they probably already spent millions, if not almost billions of dollars on it. To have it wait any longer would cost them just as much, if not more, to postpone and fix what needed to be fixed. So I think that's also what came down to not listening to the warnings, because if they had it would have just cost them more.
So why do you guys think that he was also shunned by his colleagues? Even after this disaster, they were like, oh, he predicted it right. Why do you think he was still shunned?
Like denial.
Denial?
Yeah, I think, to be like one of the people that was wrong and to like be arguably responsible for the death of those people and watch like this, like you're saying, this millions, possibly billions of dollars just burn up in, what was it, 76 seconds you said?
Yeah, 73 seconds.
73. It's like, you're not going to be like, nice going, you were right, buddy. Like, here's, like, good job. Like, what? Like, I almost feel like it's natural that they would be mad that they didn't listen to him, but not reward him for it.
So I'll make a probably controversial comparison, but think of it as like a frat where one individual calls out all the bad things they're doing. The frat's going to immediately alienate that individual and potentially kick them out.
Yeah.
Because they've been doing this. They're like, no, we're doing this. You're not going to play by our rules? Get out. And it's kind of similar to that when you think about it. And I think that's probably why they shunned him, is he broke that quote-unquote sacred code in the workplace where he whistle blew and made everyone else look bad.
Yeah, I think 100% agree with you guys on that. It's, you made us look bad. Now we're not talking to you. We don't want to, we don't want to recognize you or anything. Even if he was in the right, it doesn't matter if he was right or wrong. The fact that he went against them is that, that put him over. Yeah. So, do you think a situation like this would happen again if it were to arise? That we have this one person saying, hey, like, this program will not work, it will end in disaster, and it's a project of this scope, and let's say the media picked up on it. They said, oh, everyone's thumbs up except this one guy who's very invested in it. Do you think this story would come up and play a part into that current story?
I don't think anything like this will happen again. I think technology is so much more advanced now. They could predict the catastrophes before they even happen. So I think if there is something as simple as the weather that could cause such a disaster, they'll know about it in advance, and they will know that this is not a good day to launch.
I kind of agree, but at the same time, I think at this level, it will never happen to this level. But it probably has and definitely will happen again, where somebody is saying, hey, this is not going to work. And everyone else is not going to listen. Let's be real, it's kind of happening when it comes to COVID right now. When we kind of think about it, is a couple people at the beginning were saying, no, we need to start taking precautions. And a lot of people didn't listen, and look where we're at now. So I think it's a very that's an interesting situation to bring up when it's kind of a similar thing where it was a tragic incident that was going to happen. A few people called something bad happening. They were shunned out. They were ignored.
Yeah.
And now tragedies happened, and people are pretending like those people never existed.
Yeah,
That's a
100%.
very good point.
So, do you guys see Boys Jolly's actions as noble? How do you guys see them? And do you think it was well, it wasn't public interest. We already spoke about that to launch the space. So I just want to know: do you guys see his actions as noble? Do you see them as cautious? Do you see them as like how do you see them right now?
I think he was
It's
trying to save
noble.
lives.
Yeah,
Simple as
exactly. He was speaking out against the majority because he truly felt something was wrong. And that's about as noble as it gets. I think he's probably the only person from that crew that doesn't have a guilty conscience.
Yeah.
Because he didn't just say, like, oh, this could be a bad idea. Like, he preached
For
how
months.
bad this is.
And
Yeah.
then went to the public and said it, which
Yeah.
risked his livelihood and his life
Exactly.
in some ways when you
Because
think about it.
think of it
So,
like on the opposite. He goes to the public about all of this, and then it's totally fine. It goes off without a hitch. He's an idiot. He's
Yeah.
fired, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why'd
Especially-
you create such a controversy for nothing?
Yeah, especially with titles that he had. Like if he was making a statement, he was sure of it. And especially if you
Yeah.
go to the public.
Oh, yeah. Definitely noble.
So, has your views on Boys Jolly changed over the years, or how so? I know this is a little before our time, but just to pick your brains, have you heard about this incident? Have you heard his name? And now that you know about it, what do you think about it?
so I've not heard of him, but obviously I've heard of the Challenger. Pretty much everyone has. But knowing somebody knew the disaster would happen and tried to speak out on it makes me think about how, like, it comes down to people aren't always going to listen, and there are issues within that gray area of morality that a lot of people seem to have. So
Yeah.
for me, I think that's how my views on him have changed. Is it made me understand more so that there are so many people that live in that gray area of morality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I didn't know much about this side of the story before today, but just in the explanation that you gave, like, this whole story, I just felt like guy stood up for what he believed in, you know?
Oh, 100%. And I think
And
like after all said and done, it's easy to see that. But during the moment, I think a lot of people are like, whatever, just brush it off,
exactly.
Okay. And I do have a final question. Years down the road, how do you view this entire thing? If you had to, if not to sum it up or simplify it, but how, is this a tragedy? Is this a cautious tale? Is this a story that has a happy ending for him at least, or how do you view it?
I view it kind of as a cautionary tale, as it does kind of make people think about, hey, sometimes you do need to listen to the experts because situations like this happen. And obviously, we should have learned from that, hey, sometimes the experts know better than the individuals in charge. And obviously, like, when you look at this story, that should be a lot of what you're taking out of it is sometimes it's best to speak out, even if you do get shunned for it and it does risk things. But at least you can, as Joe brought up, go to bed with a clean conscience.
Yeah. Like
Yeah. No, that's all I'm saying. I just agree.
Oh yeah, it's better to put your 2 cents in and risk it than to keep your mouth shut, knowing that something terrible is going to happen.
He was willing to put his career on the line to save those people, and unfortunately, it didn't get enough traction.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I think people are going to take the experts much more seriously now, especially in regards to space. I mean, you could hope, right?
Yeah, I'm open. Well, that's all the time we have for today. thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one.